Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7. My name is Sheldon Chambers and I will be your host for the next hour. I will be speaking to former MSP for South Aberdeen and North Kincardine. Hi, sorry.
Hi, Sheldon.
So,
Hi, Sheldon. Nice to meet
hi.
you. As you said, I'm Maureen Watt. I'm a former MSP for Aberdeen South and North Kincardine. I retired at the 2021 election, and I've still been fighting for the cause locally and helping with Broadcasting Scotland. So, welcome to Broadcasting Scotland and carry on.
Thank you. Um, okay, good. So, So we will be looking at a Ukraine update right now. The White House has said it is out of money and nearly out of time to provide more weapons to Ukraine unless Congress acts to approve additional funding and support. The warning issued on Monday in a letter to congressional leaders said Congress needed to approve tens of billions of dollars in military and economic assistance to Ukraine, without which Kiev's effort to defend itself from Russia may grind to a halt. President Biden's budget director, Shalanda Young, said the blunt letter to the Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson that if military assistance dries up, it would kneecap Kiev's fight against the Russian invasion. Speaker Johnson claimed the Biden administration had failed to substantively address any of his conference's legitimate concerns about the lack of clear strategy in Ukraine. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban demanded that the summit of the EU leaders next week avoid any decision on Ukraine getting approval for membership talks. The European Commission recommended the bloc's leaders give their approval to launch membership talks as soon as it meets final conditions, but there are unanimous agreements in need. Major General Vladimir Zavadsky, Deputy Commander of the 14th Army Corps of the Northern Fleet, has died whilst deployed in Ukraine. According to Alexander Gusev, the governor of Russia's Voronezh region, President Vladimir Putin said Russia should never repeat Soviet-era mass repressions, even although Moscow has been engaged in an unprecedented crackdown on political opponents and its invasion of Ukraine. Speaking at COP28, Victoria Kiresvia restored permits limiting transit from Ukraine's truckers. Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki said as Polish and Slovakian truckers blocked several borders crossings to Ukraine. Ukraine's military said it had attacked oil depots in the Russian-controlled Ukrainian city of Luhansk on Sunday. Russian forces are assaulting the industrial towns of Avdiivka in eastern Ukraine from two new directions, Ukrainian officials said on Monday. So, Maureen, with the situation in Ukraine being somewhat in the shadows because of the issues with Gaza and Israel, what impact does that have on the situation in Europe?
Yeah, well, you're right, Sheldon. Undoubtedly, Ukraine is no longer the main story in the mainstream media. All attention is on, international attention is on Gaza and Israel. But it's important that politicians and international leaders are still very much in their minds, because whether we like it or not, it looks like this is going to be a very long, drawn-out war, and it's important for the West, increasingly so, that we support Ukraine in everything it does, because we must never forget that Putin is up for election next year, 2024, and he will be doing everything in his power to make sure that he comes out as a strong leader, wanting to increase the ground and the regions of Russia, even although he's not capable of properly running Russia itself. And it was interesting that a few days ago, Ukraine was bombing bridges and tunnels very far into the heart of Russia. Whether that's a new strategy, I don't know, but it's really great that at least Broadcasting Scotland is still making it top of its agenda.
Brilliant. Thank you. And obviously right now, sorry, what? Okay, we're going to now look at the situation in Israel and Gaza. Today, during the Israeli military strikes on the Gaza Strip following the 7th of October attack on Israel by Hamas, the Gaza Health Ministry has said that almost 16,000 people have been killed, 70% of which are women and children. Israel believes that Hamas is still holding more than 130 hostages within the Gaza Strip. The bombing of Gaza's second city, Khan Yunis, in the south of the coastal strip, has intensified before an expected ground incursion. Israeli armoured vehicles were reported to have taken up positions on the southern section of the main north-south highway running through Gaza, and were reported to be firing on Palestinians trying to move through the area in cars or on foot. The IDF has ordered the evacuation of the 5th of Khan Yunis, an area that was home to 117,000 people before an influx of displaced people from northern Gaza since the current of conflict began in October. The World Health Organization officials in Gaza described the situation as deteriorating by the hour. Richard Peppercorn said that the situation is getting worse by the hour. He is a World Health Organization representative on the occupied Palestinian territory. He told the media via a video link from Gaza. Israeli forces have stepped up offensives in northern and southern Gaza, claiming to have raided a Hamas military headquarters amid reports of a rise in civilian deaths. Reports from southern Gaza today said that the heavy bombardment of the city of Khan Yunis had continued. The Israeli Defense Forces said that they have mounted an attack into the heart of the Jabalia refugee camp in northern Gaza, and that paratroopers and the Navy commandos have raised the Hamas General Security Headquarters there. The IDF spokesperson, Lieutenant Colonel Richard Hecht, said that the fighting in the north had been close quarters and face-to-face. Qatar's Prime Minister said today that the mediation talks were still ongoing with an objective to end the war. Qatar continues to make efforts to restore the truce and release hostages and in exchange prisoners. Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani said. A Lebanese soldier has been killed in the south of the country by Israeli shelling, according to a statement from the country's army. 3 others were wounded in the incident. France has announced it has frozen all assets belonging to Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar for 6 months. The Kremlin says that Vladimir Putin will make a one-day trip to United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia focused on the Israeli-Hamas war, as well as also host the Iranian president in Moscow this week. So, so
That
we,
last bit is very ominous, isn't it? That Putin is hosting someone from the Middle East, and he intends to go to the Middle East. That scares me rigid. But on the other details, I mean, it's clear that Israel is not just trying to seek out Hamas, in my view. They are trying to completely raze Gaza to the ground. I mean, the fact that at the beginning of this war, they urged Palestinians to move to the south, and to places like Khan Yunis, and are now bombing Khan Yunis, which really worries me because that is where I'm sure I'm right in this, and that is where our First Minister's brother-in-law works as a doctor. So that I really hope that doctors and other medics can still carry out their work there. But I think, given that as I say, it's clear that the Israelis want to raze Gaza to the ground. I just wonder how long they will be able to continue to do that without intervention by other Middle East states. So it's a really worrying situation, in my view.
so what do you think about America's response, specifically people like Kamala Harris and other high officials in the American government on the
Well,
situation?
clearly they've been very much supportive of Israel, although it's clear that some of the people in Biden's government are appalled by the extent of the destruction and massacre of people in Gaza. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with the United States going forward.
Okay, thank you. Now we're going to be turning to COP28. First Minister Humza Yousaf has joined global leaders and outlined Scotland's ambitions to tackle the climate crisis during COP28. As the global sum committed to addressing loss and damages reaches over $650 million. Over the course of his trip, the First Minister joined His Majesty King Charles III to officially open a new Heriot Watts Dubai campus and made the keynote speech at Global Ethic Finance Initiative's GEFI Climate Finance Summit. He also hosted a St Andrew's Day reception with some of Scotland's food and drink industry leaders and joined the Scottish business delegation to discuss their work to attract investment in strategic net zero sectors across the country. New funding to provide clean and reliable energy in Scotland's partner countries, Malawi, Zambia and Rwanda, was also announced and further detailed how the £2 million from Scotland's Climate Justice Fund will help tackle loss and damage in the climate vulnerable communities. During various meetings and engagements with the world leaders, activists and communities, he reiterated Scotland's commitment to climate action, renewable energy and a just transition to net zero. First Minister Humza Yousaf said, at COP26 in Glasgow, Scotland became the first developed nation in the world to commit funding to address loss and damage. That £2 million commitment ignited a debate and showed global leadership. Despite being a relatively small amount in context of the overall challenge, that commitment now shows that the voices of small nations are crucial for the climate justice and can make a big difference. Since then, we have shown further solidarity with those who have been campaigning on loss and damages for some time and urged countries to commit the finances needed to address the challenge. And I am encouraged by the progress already made on the loss and damages at this COP. It shows that Scotland can play our part in the world stage, and we have the influence and global standing to turn a $2 million investment into an over $500 million worth of funding from some of the most powerful nations in the world, like Germany, the USA, and the UAE, in just 2 years. However, it is absolutely imperative that this funding follows Scotland's example and it's prioritised to meet the need of the communities who need it most, equitably, transparently, and distributed in a way that doesn't add to the debt burden of the global south countries. We also hope to see progress on the just transition from fossil fuels to renewables in a final agreement. The decision made at COP28 affects the prosperity, health and well-being of all of us and is not understatement to say that the actions that the world leaders take now is vital to the future of the planet we share. We want to send my best wishes to the negotiating team for what I hope will be a successful outcome of the summit. We are at a crucial juncture, and as one of the nations that led the world into the industrial age, it is vital that Scotland continues to take a leading role in the just transition to net zero. We will continue sharing our expertise and learning from our friends and partners on this journey to keep global warming limited to 1.5 degrees, an ambition which has never been more urgent. So, Maureen, Scotland has a really big renewable energy sector. How important is it that Scotland takes a charge in leading the global transition over the next decade?
Well, I think it's very important, and it's even more important now that the Westminster government seems to be rolling back on its commitments to net zero by shoving back dates at which we should meet certain targets. I read an article in one of the Scottish papers by Brian Wilson, a former minister of a Labour government. And he was criticising Hamza for being at COP and for parading on the world stage, as he said, because we are not a nation and a true government with all powers. And I just thought how absolutely ridiculous. And you've shown, Sheldon, by what you said, that the very small amount that our former First Minister Nicola Sturgeon put into a loss and damage fund, starting a loss and damage fund, has now increased as bigger countries commit more. And I know firsthand how important these projects are in Malawi, having visited Malawi a few times. And our relationship with Malawi has always been strong, and it's great that strength of our relationship can actually help in terms of loss and damage through climate change. And we've seen the effects of huge storms raging through Mozambique and into Malawi, and what has happened when rivers have broken their banks there. So this is hugely important. And, it shows that a small country, even without full powers of a normal nation state, can have huge influence on the international stage by leading by example and showing that we can party too with a St. Andrew's Day's reception, which I'm sure went down very well with delegates. And that soft diplomacy is really important as well. So I think the First Minister has had a great influential time at COP. And, long may it continue that Scotland is showing a
Do you
great
want me to
lead
ask that?
in this area.
So did Brian Wilson criticise Jack McConnell when he went to Malawi?
Not to give Jack McConnell his due, he he, as First Minister in the first government, did set up the partnership or built on existing NGO partnerships in Malawi. And there are people like Karen Gillan, who was the convener of the cross-party group in Malawi, who asked me to take her over her place when she lost her seat. Did do a lot in Malawi, and to be fair, still do. But Brian Wilson, I can't recall him criticising Jack McConnell for being on the international stage. No.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. We're going to go to the new agreement signed by the UK government with Rwanda on the asylum, sending asylum seekers. In Rwanda today, James Cleverly became the third UK Home Secretary in 19 months to sign an agreement with Rwanda government in hope that they will allow the government to send people seeking asylum to East Africa. The new agreement is in response to last month's UK Supreme Court ruling, which found that the UK's government plans to deport asylum seekers to Rwanda were unlawful. The government's claims that the new treaty responds directly to the conclusions of the Supreme Court and presents a new long-term solution. So far, UK ministers have handed over £140 million to the Rwandan government, but have declined to disclose how much has been paid out in extra costs in Rwanda and the UK, particularly in a series of lengthy court cases. Asked if there would be additional money for the new treaty, Mr. Cleverly said, "The financial arrangements which inevitably come as a part of the international agreement reflects the cost that may be imposed on Rwanda through the changes that this partnership has created, and in their systems, in their legal systems and their institutions." The Home Office claims that the treaty enhances the functions of a monitoring committee in Rwanda to ensure compliance with obligations such as reception conditions, processing of asylum claims, and the treatment and support for asylum seekers. Enver Solomon, the head of the Refugee Council, said that the announcement did not overturn the judgment of the Supreme Court and would instead send people seeking help 4,000 miles away. The Scottish Greens Justice spokesperson Maggie Chapman said that the Tory Rwanda deportation scheme is one of the most repulsive, inhumane and morally bankrupt policies the Tories have come up with. I was just wondering, what is the impact of the Rwanda policy on certain domestic legislation created by the Scottish government?
I'm not sure on that. Clearly, an awful lot of energy is being expended on this policy by the Tory government because, of course, it's one of their 5 key pledges to the country going into a general election. But it shows complete and utter desperation by the UK government in terms of this policy, which, as you said, Sheldon, has been thrown out by the Supreme Court. And of course, any new contract that the UK government has with the Rwandan government will, of course, be taken by groups who represent refugees. Again, I would think, to the Supreme Court. So it's by no means certain that this new move will result in the UK government being able to send asylum seekers to Rwanda. And however, I did hear that the Rwandan people are getting a bit fed up of all the energy that's being spent by their government on this policy rather than concentrating on domestic issues. So that is very interesting too. And of course, this is going to cost a huge amount of money in terms of the cost of monitors in Rwanda, the cost of lawyers going to represent refugees in Rwanda in front of Rwandan courts. So this policy is hugely, hugely expensive. And if they could just sort out the mess that they're making of dealing with refugee claims in this country faster, then surely it wouldn't cost so much. If they spent as much money on sorting out the problems that they have here in the UK, in policing people in hotels and not processing their claims quickly enough, then I'm sure we would have a better outcome.
Thank you. And what is the risk of referment for asylum seekers sent to Rwanda?
Well, we don't know fully how they're going to be treated, and that's why it's really important that there are monitors on the ground in Rwanda. I think they hope to get a message out of the fear, putting fear into refugees coming across in small boats, that, you know, they are likely to be sent to Rwanda and please don't come. But, you know, people who have traveled thousands and thousands of miles from Africa and other countries already, and risk their lives coming across in small boats, when they've come so far, I can't see that they're going to be that put off with the threat of being deported to Rwanda at this time. So I think it's all very worrying. I still have grave concerns about the Rwandan
Sorry, what?
government, and yeah, I just hope there's an election before all this is kicks in. Honestly.
Thank you. We're now going to turn to the impact of the two-child cap in Scotland. New research by the Child Poverty Coalition shows that the areas hit hardest by the UK government's two-child limits are also areas with the highest rates of child poverty. Experts have said that the two-child cap policy is one of the biggest drivers of the child poverty, and scrapping the measure would lift 250,000 children, 15,000 in Scotland, out of poverty cost effectively. The Scottish Government introduced the Scottish Child Payment, which has been hailed as a game changer in lifting 90,000 children in Scotland out of poverty. The Scottish Government is also making 83.7 million available to local authorities to spend on discretionary housing payments, including 69.7 million to mitigate the bedroom tax, 62 million to mitigate the benefit cap as fully as possible, and 7.9 million to mitigate against other UK government welfare cuts. The Scottish Government say they have spent over £1 billion mitigating the impact of 13 years of UK government policy. Commenting on the research, the SNP's social justice spokesman said, David Linden MP said, it is a matter of urgency that the poverty-inducing two-child cap is abolished. That is why I am urging the UK government to abolish it without delay. Doing so could lift 250,000 children, 15,000 in Scotland, out of poverty. The goal is to reduce and eventually eradicate child poverty. Will need the efforts and voices from across the political spectrum. That is why I am also urging Sir Keir Starmer to reverse his decision to keep the heinous policy under a Labour government and join us in putting the pressure on the Tory government to scrap it. If he will not, then he is making clear once again that Labour's values do not align with Scotland's values, including lifting children and families out of poverty. Westminster policies like the two-child cap continue to undermine the Scottish Government's efforts, and this will continue to be the case whilst we remain under Westminster's control and without independence. How important is it that families who need it the most are supported during this living crisis?
Yeah, I mean, the cost of living crisis is still the number one priority of people in Scotland and throughout the UK. And, you know, it pains me so much because devolution wasn't set up to mitigate the worst excesses of a cruel Tory government in Westminster. There are lots of other things that we should and could be doing if we didn't have to make sure that more families didn't fall into abject poverty. I mean, 1 billion is a huge amount of money, proportion of the Scottish Parliament's budget, and just think what we could do with that money. But we have to do it because we want to see fairer, more just Scotland, where the excesses of rich and poor are minimised, and that there is a fairer, more just, more equitable Scotland. And the fact that an incoming, maybe Labour government refuses to do away with the two-child cap and the rape clause is really, really, it beggars belief, and it shows how far right the Labour Party have gone during this time of a Tory government, that they've completely forgotten the values. I mean, I couldn't see, we talked earlier this last week, Alistair Darling died, and
Sorry,
I
I
can't
can't hear
imagine him being happy with a situation where an incoming Labour government aren't going to scrap these awful policies. So that in itself should be a big electioneering point for the SNP in the upcoming election, because it is cruel, barbaric, and just shouldn't be there.
So what would you say to the Scottish Labour leader Anna Sarwar about the two-child cap?
Well, you know, I'm not sure. I don't think that Anna Sarwar is happy with. I don't think most people in the Scottish Labour Party, or at least I hope not, Scotland is just a branch office of the Labour Party at Westminster, and they haven't got the guts to stand up to him because of the situation that we're in. So it'll be interesting to see whether if Labour win the election, once they have won the election, whether the Labour Party in Scotland will be more vocal, or whether they'll just be voting fodder in the lobbies for retaining these cruel policies.
Thank you. We're now going to be turning to a report that found 1 in 4 people risk falling into debt this Christmas. A new report by the Money and Pension Service published today has highlighted that over 40 million people, 1 in 4, risk falling into debt through the use of credit cards or pawn shops this Christmas. The average total debt per household in the UK at the end of September 2023 is already at £65,724. That is up by £481 in a year. This follows a report on by the Resolution Foundation and London School of Economics calling for an urgent rethink in Westminster's economic strategy. After analysis showed UK workers are missing out on over 10,000 a year, with UK living standards falling behind other G7 nations as well as Australia and the Netherlands. The SNP's economic spokesperson Drew Hendry MP has called on the UK government to introduce a £400 energy rebate and a mortgage interest tax relief. Commenting, Drew Hendry said, "The Westminster government has known for a long time that this festive season would be difficult for many across the UK. With rising energy costs and many families still paying off last winter's debts, the autumn statement was an opportunity to support ordinary working households across Scotland and the UK. They chose not to take it. The Scottish Government is ensuring money stays in people's pockets this winter by freezing council tax and through the Scottish Child Payment and Best Start grants. This is on top of protecting Scottish households from Westminster's cruel bedroom tax and housing benefits cap, 2 things we should not have to do. The reality is that the UK economy is trapped in a vicious cycle of poor growth, stagnant wages and rising poverty as a result of Westminster's Brexit and austerity cuts. Scotland deserves better in the UK's dire economic situation. With Labour locking itself into Tory tax and spending plans, it is clear that independence is the only way to protect Scotland's economy and create a fairer and more prosperous country. I was wondering, with the previous answer, you talked about the fact that devolution has not provided Scotland or government with the tools to deal with a living crisis. I was wondering if there was another discussion on the powers of devolution, what do you think the Scottish Government should be asking for so if a crisis like this happened again, it was able to do more?
Well, obviously, we need full independence and certainly full control of economic powers, because austerity is an economic choice. It doesn't have to be like this. There are other ways of running the economy. And I've talked before about how in the EU and in the United States, post shocks like the pandemic, like the crash in 2008-9, the governments pumped money into the economy, into infrastructure projects and into the well-being of the economy in order to boost growth and to boost employment, thereby boosting tax take from individuals through their income tax and businesses through corporation tax, etc. So we should never forget that this austerity is an economic choice and there are other ways of running your economy. And that's why the SNP is increasingly talking about a well-being economy. So I don't think that you can really make a big difference to the economy without having all the levers, economic levers, and full independence in order to do that. And, you know, any small powers that we might get, you know, and I don't think that's going to be the case, are simply tinkering around the edges and trying to make the best of a bad job. So I think only with full independence, and the fact that the majority of Scots now are, according to polls, are in favour of independence, more and more people are clearly seeing this. And the fact that we're talking, you know, pre-Christmas, three weeks out from Christmas, that more families are going to fall into poverty. It really is hard on families with children, and, you know, children asking for things that clearly parents can't afford. And I think it was Oxfam who this week were saying, you know, please look to coming into our shops first to see where you can get things to fill stockings and to give us Christmas presents, because, you know, you're also helping to reuse and recycle, as well as providing gifts. And we shouldn't forget that it's the art of giving rather than receiving that's important at Christmas.
Thank you. We are now going to turn to America. The US has broken mass shooting records this year. A series of murders over the weekend have propelled the United States to a grisly new record, the most recorded mass shootings in a year. 2 attacks on Sunday, occurring within a couple of hours of each other in Texas and Washington state, were this year's 37th and 38th mass shooting. Authorities believe a murder-suicide was responsible for the death of 5 family members in Vancouver, a suburb of Portland, Oregon, just across the border in Washington, while in Dallas, a 21-year-old with a previous aggravated assault charge shot 5 people in a house, including a toddler. It is the highest number of mass shootings in any year since at least 2006, breaking the previous record of 36 reached in last year. Another attack occurred on Sunday in New York City when a 38-year-old man stabbed 4 of his relatives, including 2 children, as well as another woman and 2 police officers before they shot him. That was the country's 41st mass killing of 2023, according to the Associated Press database. At least 203 people have died this year in mass killings, defined as incidents which 4 or more people have died, not including the killer. The FBI uses a similar definition. Despite the media attention they attract, most mass shootings do not happen in public spaces, with at least 26 of this year's 38 happening in private homes or shelters, according to the Washington Post. Different groups count mass shootings and killings in different ways. Some, such as the Gun Violence Archive, include events in which multiple people are shot regardless of the number of deaths, and so reports a much higher figure. Its tally for the year is 630 mass shootings. Mass shooting deaths dropped in 2020 during the COVID pandemic to 21, but have since rebounded to a new record. The 4th of July long weekend was overshadowed by 16 shootings in which 15 people were killed and nearly 100 injured. But the deadliest attack of 2023 happened in Lewiston, Maine, on the 25th of October, when an Army reservist murdered 18 people in a bowling alley and bar. Previously, the year's worst attack had been in January, when a man shot 11 people in Monterey Park, California, with a semi-automatic rifle during a Lunar Year celebration. What can be done about the gun violence in America?
Well, while you were reporting on this subject, Sheldon, I was just thinking how quickly after the Dunblane massacre that legislation was put through Parliament to control guns and gun licenses here. And I never fail to be shocked at how parliamentarians and legislators in the US fail to take the bull by the horns and have legislation in the US. And it just shows you how powerful the gun lobby is, and the National Rifle Association have so much power over Congress people in the US. But, you know, a lot of it could be avoided if there were better background checks on people before they were given licenses to hold guns, and they could outlaw surely some of the more powerful weapons that wouldn't go against the Constitution of the United States and the right to bear arms. Surely they can change or work around the legislation to make sure that it isn't, you know, guns that can kill multiple people in one go, as these mass shootings are. So, you know, Biden hasn't got all that long to get any legislation in place, but surely, I mean, just how many people need to be killed before there is an outcry, more of an outcry in the US? Because you mentioned killings throughout the United States. It's not just in one or two areas. It's a national problem, but yet nothing. We talk about this a lot, and yet still nothing seems to be done.
Thank you very much. I'm going to have to move on now to reforms in the further education and skills funding in Scotland. Arrangements to deliver funding support for learners beyond school is to be simplified as a part of ongoing reform to the education and skills sector. Announcing the commitment in an update to Parliament, Ministers for Higher Education and Further Education Graham Day also set out the intention to streamline funding for colleges, universities and apprenticeships. Currently, funding across the sector is provided by multiple organisations, including the Student Award Agency Scotland, SAS, the Scottish Funding Council and the Skill Development Scotland. The ministers confirmed that the Scottish Government will take over skill planning at the national level. There will also be a review into the community learning development Mr. Day said Scotland's colleges, universities and apprenticeships are a vital part of our national infrastructure, and it is important that every pound invested delivers the greatest impact. To do that, we must reduce complexities to making sure more of our investment directly supports learners. While I recognise the important role played by all the bodies involved in the funding, as an initial step, I am committed to bringing together learner support funding into one place and funding for apprenticeship provisions into one place. I will work closely with the SFC, SAS and SDS to make this happen. Our review of the CLD will identify strengths and highlight areas for improvement so that as we progress reforms, we can ensure that everyone benefits. It is crucially important for us to be able to identify strengths in our current approach to CLD and to highlight where improvements may be necessary. How important are these reforms in providing better access to education, especially amongst minority groups?
I think this is a very important announcement, and it'll be interesting to see how mainstream media deals with this. I think that there are a couple of things that come out of this. One of them is a better parity of esteem between the different avenues in which you can continue your learning between universities, colleges, and apprenticeships. I mean, we have seen great strides between universities and colleges insofar as people can turn from college to university much more smoothly now, into second or even third year in some cases, where learning and go on from HNCs or HNDs to university degrees. And I think Skills Development Scotland, which I actually set up as Minister for Schools and Skills, has probably served its purpose and needs to be looked at. And giving apprentices that same parity of esteem is really important because, you know, many apprentices go to learning in colleges and get the appetite for further learning. So I think this is really important. And the other important point is talking about community learning development. Learning is lifelong, and it's getting even more important as we see the move towards artificial intelligence being like another industrial revolution. So I think streamlining all these pots of money in funding of this is really important, and I hope that all aspects of our education system will buy into this.
Thank you very much. Sticking with education, PISA study shows Scottish education maintains its international standing. The latest global study of education performance across more than 80 countries reveals Scotland has maintained its international standing. The 2022 Programme for International Student Assessment, PISA, study shows that in Scotland, performance in reading was above the OECD average, with results in maths and science in line with the average. These results reflect a cohort of young people who experienced unprecedented disruption in their education as a result of the school closures during the COVID-19 pandemic. The PISA 2022 results for Scotland show Scotland's reading performance was above the OECD average and are higher than 24 other countries. Scotland's performance in maths was similar to the OECD average, and Scotland's science performance was similar to the OECD average. Scotland's own overall performance compared to 2018 was similar in science and declined in reading and maths. Education Secretary Jenny Gilruth said, "As it is well understood, the COVID-19 pandemic has had a profound impact on our young people and their experience of learning and teaching. PISA demonstrates this impact across the majority of countries participating. Whilst every country in the UK has seen a reduction in its PISA scores across maths and reading between 2018 and 2022, there will be key learning for the Scottish Government and COSLA to address jointly in responding. Since PISA was conducted, wider evidence from both the 2023 national qualification results and the most recent literacy and numeracy data for primary show clear evidence of an ongoing recovery which we are determined to build on. Our participation in PISA provides valuable information to support educational improvements that will be further strengthened by our decisions earlier this year to rejoin the trends in international mathematics and sciences, TIMS, and the progress in international reading literacy studies. Ms Gilruth said that she will provide the Scottish Parliament with a full update next week reflecting on both PISA and the 2023 national literacy and numeracy data, which will be based on teacher judgment. So what can the Scottish Government do to boost the science and mathematic results above average in line with the reading scores?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that that is a more measured report on what the PISA study says than what we've been listening to today in the mainstream media. Clearly, being just about average is not, in my book, good enough for Scottish education. And where we have intervened, for example, in literacy and reading, with the baby box, with books in the baby box, and the former First Minister's reading challenge, we are seeing results. I think with science and maths has always been difficult, and I was just reading today that in Aberdeenshire, we are experiencing difficulty getting teachers at secondary level in some parts of Aberdeenshire. So that is kind of an added challenge on this. But clearly, science and maths are really important. It's important that parents support their children and make sure that where they're struggling, they ask for extra help from the teaching staff, and they're always so willing to give it. But the other thing that is clear, and we've seen from other reports, is that the importance of going to school has been severely dented by the COVID pandemic. And, you know, too many children are taking too many days off, even in 1 week, because they haven't got back into the routine of going to school after the pandemic. And I think that really needs to be addressed. How you address it is really difficult, but it needs to be a coordinated approach between teaching staff and parents have a real duty to make sure that they instill in their children the real importance of learning. But it's not without its difficulties.
Thank you very much. We are now going to move on to calls from... We're moving on to our final story about NHS 24 in Scotland calling for people to remember to call up their GPs or pharmacies for their prescriptions this festival period. As the festive season approaches, NHS 24 is urging people of Scotland to be prepared, and if they rely on prescribed medicine, to make sure that they have enough medicines to cover them over the Christmas holidays. Ensuring people don't run out of essential medicines over this period will help them to manage their health during this busy time of year. In a statement today, Dr. John McAnar, Head of Pharmacy and Associate Clinical Director at NHS 24, has emphasised the importance of being organised with prescriptions. Dr. McAnar said, "December is a hectic time of year, and it is understandable that health needs such as ordering and picking up prescriptions can be forgotten about until the very last minute. Every year over the festive holidays, NHS 24's 111 service receives a high number of calls from people who have either lost or run out of their prescribed medicine. To avoid this stressful situation, we are encouraging people to check their medication supplies now, order only what you need, and to see yourself through the festive period. And make sure you remember to pick up what you've ordered before GP practices and pharmacies close for the holiday. This will mean that you can focus on enjoying the festive celebrations with your loved ones and help support the 111 service this Christmas so that they are able to deal with people who require urgent health advice. In addition to prescription medications, NHS 24's winter health campaign, Healthy Know How, also recommends that individuals keep some over-the-counter medicine at home to use for common ailments and illnesses such as colds, flus and sore throats. The NHS 24's advice is that people have some remedies readily available, such as pain relief, as well as treatments to help with cold symptoms, diarrhoea, constipation and indigestion. For more information on NHS 24's winter campaign, visit their website at nhsinform.scot/winter.
I think, well, having been Minister for Health, I've signed off on this campaign, and it's really important that you do it now, not leave it till the week before Christmas. And please don't overorder or hoard medicines. The health service is in need of so much money that, if you're not using your medicines, for goodness sake, discuss it with the pharmacist at the practice or the nurse who's dealing with prescriptions. But please don't hoard medicines, but only order, as I said, what you need, but order it sooner rather than later.
Thank you very much. Well, this is it from us this evening. Before I go, I want to remind you that Broadcasting Scotland, we depend on the generosity of our supporters. So to everyone who has donated and to everyone who has signed up to make a regular monthly payment, thank you very much. Our programme will always be free to view. However, if you can afford £5 a month, please consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter. Our need to reach our £30,000 target to pay our bills is still pressing. Due to the generosity of our supporters, we have raised over £21,000. However, our need to raise the remaining £9,000 is really urgent. Good night and thank you for watching.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Lewis McGlynn.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Saoirse Healy.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Donald C. Stewart. Broadcasting Scotland is Scotland's independent broadcaster, providing factual news, reporting on the issues important to the people of Scotland.
We are committed to public service broadcasting, and with your support, we will produce even more programmes.
Provide opportunities for young people interested in media production and broadcasting, and challenge preconceptions of what Scottish media looks like, amplifying Scotland's voice and reflecting its communities.
We can already deliver high-quality live news, and we will create the highest quality programmes for you to enjoy. But we can only do that with your support.
So please subscribe to and share our channel or donate to Broadcasting Scotland via the link in the description. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.